Welcome back to another Boardroom Briefing. I am your host, Paul Maskill, and today we're going to talk about one of the most common mistakes owners make when the business feels tight. They decide the answer is more revenue, more calls, more booked work, more trucks, more top line growth. We tell ourselves, if we just get to X, then we'll finally be profitable. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. If cash feels tight, profit feels thin, if the business feels heavier than it should, the natural instinct is to assume that the company simply needs to get bigger. And that is a statement that if you really unpack it, the company needs to get bigger. It's not like we just add more revenue, nothing else gets bigger, but everything gets bigger. And in a lot of 5 to 8 million, $10 million home service businesses, more revenue is not the solution. In fact, it can make the business feel weaker because it is weaker. That's what makes this such an important conversation, because growth is easy to fall in love with. Whenever we talk to somebody, whenever we see something on social media, one of the first things we hear is how much revenue we're doing or how many trucks we have on the road. It feels productive. It feels like forward motion. But if the financial structure underneath the business is already strained, more revenue often amplifies the exact problems that we are trying to solve. So that's what we're going to talk about in this briefing: is the illusion around growth, why more revenue is often the wrong goal, what actually happens when businesses scale weak structure, and as always, what do the disciplined operators do differently? So here's the thing. If we get bigger, things will smooth out. Most owners don't chase more revenue because they're reckless. They're not just chasing it to chase it. They believe that it feels logical. They're chasing it because it feels like the logical next step. If the business is under pressure, they assume the solution is more top line volume. They think that we just need more calls. We just need to sell more work. Once we just get $1 million more, once we get $2 million more, whatever it is, we just need one more truck on the road. Once we get to that revenue level, things will finally get easier. And this usually often comes from a point of frustration too. Many of the people I talk to, whether they're clients, prospective clients, or just business owners in the trades, is when they get to this point, they start to pause, they look back and realize, I was making more, as in taking home more money, and working less when it was like me and two other people, than it is now when we're doing $5 million. And I'm way more stressed now. And growth, the reason here is growth is always celebrated. Bigger is seen as better. Revenue is super easy to talk about. So we naturally assume as owners, bigger revenue means stronger businesses. More sales means more safety. Scaling up will eventually fix the tight margins and tight cash. And that's all an illusion. The illusion that if we do these things, it's going to solve the problem. It's going to cure the structural problems of this business. It doesn't usually ever happen. It actually always exposes it. So what actually happens when weak structure grows? Here is where the problem lies. Revenue does not flow directly into profit. So if you're saying, I just need a little bit more money and then we'll be good. Well, if you go do, and I talk about this a lot, but if you say I need $10,000 more dollars, say you just simple example, I just need $10,000 more dollars. Depending on your business, that might be 1, 2, 3, or 4 jobs. You might say, I just need 3 more jobs to get that $10,000. But if your profit margin is only 5%, which is pretty common in business ownership in the home service space, in order to get that money, that $10,000, you actually need to do $200,000 in revenue to have 5% left over, which is $10,000. So the reason for that is revenue flows through pricing, through labor, through overhead, and pure just operation and execution. And if all those systems are already misaligned, more revenue is going to put more pressure on them. That means if pricing is weak, more revenue simply means more underpriced work. If labor efficiency is weak, more revenue means more payroll pressure. If overhead is already too heavy, more revenue often requires even more overhead to support it because we're already inefficient. You're not going to magically become efficient with overhead. If you're inefficient now, doing more revenue will just make you more inefficient with overhead. And if we're already making, as owners, reactive decisions, more revenue is going to increase the speed and cost of those reactive decisions. Usually those things are mistakes. So that is why so many owners experience a deeply frustrating reality. They grow the company, but the business does not feel better. It feels heavier, feels more complex, feels more stressful. It's more expensive to operate. And it feels like we just have to keep feeding this machine. And if we just stop for a day, the machine breaks. And that's because the business did not outgrow the problem. It simply scaled the problem. And a lot of times that's what I like. The very first thing we work on with our clients here at Blue Collar Business Advisors is before we go get more revenue, there's a couple things we really have to do. First, we got to get the data clean and accurate. Most home service businesses, their data is a disaster. Their financial statements make no sense. Their chart of accounts is not correct. So before we even do anything, first we got to get the data right. And then the next thing from there is we actually then have to build the foundation. Before we go get any more revenue, we got to make sure our gross profit's dialed in, making sure our overhead's dialed in, making sure we got a good call booking rate, making sure we're performing in the field. We got to make sure all these things are operating before we go do more of them, because if it's not, doing more of them is going to make it more stressful, more complex, more expensive. So more revenue is usually going to increase the cash pressure. And this is where owners get especially confused. They assume that if they sell more, cash should improve. Again, I'm going to beat a dead horse because I see this problem way too many times. But if each additional dollar of revenue is being generated through weak pricing, weak labor, rising overhead, poor office payroll, not efficient marketing, then more revenue can actually increase the cash pressure instead of reducing it. Going back to what we said, more volume is going to require more everything, more payroll, more scheduling pressure, more trucks, more things breaking, more office support, more marketing. So now we're doing more of everything except profit because we have more costs, we have more moving pieces, and there's more ways to lose control. This business is not simple anymore. And that's why businesses are going to hit a point where growth feels expensive instead of exciting. And the truth is, growth is expensive. We have to invest in order to get to the next level. But if we're not investing in the right vehicle, we will never get to the next level. Unfortunately, most owners just keep pushing for more. The definition of sanity is we do the same thing and we're expecting different results. Most business owners do the same thing and they're expecting different results. We're going to keep pushing for more volume. But the truth is, the financial engine underneath the business is not equipped to handle more. It is not equipped to convert that extra volume into the proper margin and proper cash that it should. And when that happens, growth becomes a stress multiplier. If it's broken at 2 million, if you keep doing the same thing and you do it at 4 million, it's going to be probably more than twice as hard, even though 2 to 4 is just double, because things happen exponentially. So this is really the heart of it. A lot of owners think that they have a revenue problem. They think we've done all the hard work. Now we just got to go get more revenue. And that's because they don't understand their numbers. They don't truly understand what's driving gross profit. They don't truly understand what would happen if they improve their call booking rate. They don't understand what their office payroll should be for the size of their business. They don't understand how much revenue each technician should be generating for their business. They just assume if we just had more work, we'd be fine. If the board was just a little bit more full and maybe we had a couple more technicians, cash would improve. And if we just get through that invisible ceiling that a lot of people talk about, depending on who you listen to, who you follow, right? We're going to get to 1 million. And then we're going to get to 3, and then we got to break through at 5, and then maybe we got to break through at 8 to 10. And we believe if we just cross that revenue threshold, the pressure will ease. But often the issue is not that there's too little revenue. It's that the current revenue is not structured well enough. Usually means one or more of the following. Pricing is not truly funding labor, overhead, and profit. Our pricing is just not aligned. Our labor is way less efficient than we realize. Our labor is just not producing enough revenue, and maybe their dispatching is not efficient. Maybe they're not getting paid properly, whatever it might be. Overhead, at least the dollar amount overhead that we're spending, is meant for a much bigger business at a much better margin than when we are. We have worse margins and we are smaller. And if we're not already operating efficiently with overhead, more revenue is not going to make overhead efficient if you guys don't already know how to be efficient with your overhead. And really what it comes down to is most of the time management is making decisions with a very limited visibility. They're making decisions using three different methods. One is their emotion, two is their ego, and three are their excuses. Those are the three things that are getting in the way of actually moving the needle. Now, the fourth part to that is we actually need good data. And like I said earlier, most businesses do not have good data. If we had clear visibility and we had great data, it would be really easy, or at least really simple. It would be really simple to know what we need to do. Then it's actually hard to implement. And that's where a lot of even our clients, get hung up is once we get the numbers, get the data clear, figure out what we need to do. The numbers are going to tell us exactly what we need to do if we have clear visibility into the business using numbers. The numbers do not have emotion. Yes, they might hurt your feelings. They might tell you your baby's ugly. But once we have that clear visibility with the numbers, then it's actually taking action, which is the hard part, because we can come up with every excuse in the book of why we shouldn't charge more, or why we should deal with our vendors differently, or why we should make our labor more efficient. We're going to have an excuse for everything because it's doing something differently than you have done it in the past. But here's the problem. The consequence of continuing doing what you're doing, if your business is currently broken and not profitable, more revenue will not solve the problem. The consequence is it's going to be bigger, it's going to be busier, and it's going to be even tighter. When we chase more revenue before fixing the structure, the outcome is often predictable. The company gets bigger, but not stronger. Revenue rises, but stress rises. Complexity rises, payroll rises, overhead rises, and the owner cannot sleep at night. It feels tighter than ever. And thing about it, said it a million times, but when you build a structure like a home, you've got to have the right foundation before you build up however many stories you want to build up. If you do not have the foundation, more is not going to be better. Yes, short term, it might feel good and look good. Long term, you're building a bigger problem, and eventually that house is going to come crumbling down. You're only going to be able to kick the can down the road so far. You're only going to be able to draw on the line of credit so far. You're only going to be able to push your vendors' payments out so far. Eventually, the music stops and you got to pay the bill. We got to get rid of the feeling that growth is the solution. In some cases it is, but in some cases it isn't. Most of the time it isn't until we figure out our numbers. It's just making the existing weaknesses more expensive. From a bank's perspective, it creates caution. From a buyer's perspective, if you ever want to sell your business, it creates doubt. And from an employee standpoint, eventually your team is going to realize that this place doesn't seem very safe to work. And I got to ask myself, what's in it for me? And I'm going to start looking elsewhere. Because a company that needs constant top line pressure just to stay healthy is not viewed as highly resilient. It's viewed as financially fragile. If you have to have your best day every day, otherwise things get stressful, that's not a good place to be. If you have to have your best month every month, that gets stressful, because yes, you can go a certain distance just by continuing to grow, because you're going to take all of it's like robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're going to take all this money and pay this, take all this money and pay this. And you're trying to play catch up, but you're really just on this hamster wheel that eventually, if the next month isn't bigger than the previous month, that's when we start to run into problems, because we're not running a financially healthy business. So lastly, what does that disciplined operator do? They optimize before they scale. Like I said, what do we do with our clients? Disciplined operators do not reject growth. They sequence it correctly. And that is the key. They sequence it correctly. So like I said, with our clients, first thing we do is let's make sure our data is very accurate from our CRM, whether it's Service Titan, Jobber, House Call Pro, Field Pulse, Field Edge, whatever you're using. Let's make sure we're operating it and using it efficiently. Let's make sure we know all of our KPIs. And then looking at our financials, let's make sure our balance sheet is accurate. Balance sheet is probably more important than your P&L, but nobody ever looks at it. Let's make sure our P&L is accurate. Let's make sure our chart of accounts are accurate. Let's make sure we know how we are delivering by division. So if you have an install division and a service division and maybe a construction division, how is each one performing individually, so we know what our strengths and weaknesses are? Again, the disciplined operator sequences their actions correctly. They put growth in the spot where it makes the most sense. They understand that growth is powerful only when the structure is right and the underlying economics are working. So instead of asking, how do we get bigger? They ask, is our current revenue producing the margin that it should? Are we converting work into cash efficiently? Nobody ever asks themselves that. Are we converting work into cash efficiently? Is pricing truly aligned with our cost structure? Usually the answer is no here because we're not pricing properly. Are we staffed correctly for the revenue we have right now? What does our office payroll look like compared to the staff out in the field? And if we added 20% more volume, would the business get healthier or just more chaotic? If you're producing predictable profitability and consistent positive cash flow, meaning your net profit, call it is 15 to 20%, then it's probably time to scale if you're not already scaling, because now you have, and you do that over time. If you look at the last 6 months, like, wow, we know that if we do 200,000 in revenue, we're going to make 40,000 at the end of the month. And if it's truly predictable, then it's probably time to scale. The reason is because you have cash to do it. It is expensive to scale. You have to invest before you do more revenue. You've got to either invest in trucks, you got to invest in technicians, you got to invest in training, you got to invest in a new building, you got to invest in a new CSR or dispatcher. So, but in order to make those investments, we got to know that we're going to continue to produce consistent cash flow, predictable profitability as this thing goes along. It is a more controlled business. And once control is established, growth becomes much more valuable and a lot more fun. And we're not doing it just to impress the next person that we meet at a trade show. So if your business feels tight, do not automatically assume that the answer is more revenue. Ask whether the current revenue is actually doing its job, because in many home service businesses, more top line growth is not the cure. It is the thing that makes weak structure more expensive. But when we optimize margin, labor, overhead, marketing, decision making, then growth becomes an asset instead of a burden. Lastly, if this conversation resonated with you, head on over to my website, thebluecollaradvisors.com. There you can learn more about how we work with owners just like you to help you create consistent positive cash flow, achieve your financial goals, so that way you can build a life that you love. Book a call there if it makes sense. If not, don't have to book a call. There's a pricing calculator there that you can check to see if you're priced effectively and accurately. And then there are additional resources like the podcast and other blogs and whatnot. So lastly, this podcast exists to create clarity. And if this helped provide that clarity to you and we didn't hurt your feelings too bad, you're exactly where you need to be. I'll see you in the next boardroom briefing.